Welcome. My name is Dr. Regina Washington, Director of Rural Impact Networks and Managing Director of the Rural Library Network for Partners for Rural Impact. I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Partners for Rural Impact, better known as PRI, is working to ensure that all rural students ages 0 to 24 years succeed. Using a cradle to career and place-based approach, we operate at the local, state, and regional and national levels to accelerate outcomes for children and youth living in rural America. We increase access to high-quality programs, strengthen civic infrastructure, and drive resources and investment in rural communities. One of PRI's initiative is the Rural Library Network Conversations for Action webinar. This is a free 1-hour webinar that Rural Library Network uses to engage rural library professionals and their partners, share best practices, and celebrate the work. Exciting changes are happening this year, beginning with structural changes with the Rural Library Network it's now situated in the executive office of the CEO of Partners for Rural Impact. There are two types of conversations that will happen throughout this year. Conversations for Impact hosted by Dr. Chanel Barber, Chief of Staff and VP of Strategic Partnerships, and Conversations for Action, hosted by the Rural Library Network. I will share more information at the end of this webinar. Next slide, please. The Rural Library Network has 1,623 registered members nationwide. This network engages rural libraries through national, regional, state, and local events and drive resources to rural libraries across America to support children's education from cradle to career. The network focuses on connecting members with resources related to family and community engagement, summer learning, advocacy, and youth services, to name a few. In addition to hosting conversations throughout the year, we also have an annual e-summit in December. Thank you to those who joined us last year in December for the 2023 Rural Library Network e-summit. We connect libraries that attend the e-summit with resources to assist with programs, services, and services for children and families. Please take a moment to complete the Rural Library Network membership application. The link is actually going to be in chat. Without further ado, I would like to welcome today's speakers to the show. We're excited to have representatives from the Black Caucus of the American Library Association. Today's topic is creating your first Black History Month program. Ms. Nichelle M. Hayes, she's actually the president of the Black Caucus of the American Library Association, working as information professional with a focus on the African diaspora, community engagement, and inclusion. She's an active member of the American Library Association, and she serves on the 2023 ALA nominating committee. Ms. Hayes, or President Hayes, should I say, recently was honored as a 2023 Culture Carrier Award honoree and 2022 National Coalition of 100 Black Women Breakthrough Women Award. Now, she's also a graduate of Indiana University, formerly the School of Library and Information Sciences, with her master's in library science. Welcome, Nichelle, President Nichelle, to the show. Dr. Grace Jackson Brown holds a PhD in communication from Indiana University, Bloomington, and a master's degree in information management from Emporia State University, Emporia, Kansas. She is currently the project director for the ALA Black Caucus in partnership with the University of Michigan. working with an IMLS-funded grant project, developing a model of Black History Month programming in public libraries. She presently works as a research and instruction librarian at Missouri State University, better known as MSU. Before coming to MSU, Dr. Jackson Brown served for 18 years with Indiana University Libraries, where she was branch library head of both the Neil Marshall Black Cultural Center Library and the Wheel Journalism Library. She is an academic librarian who describes herself as having a passion for library programming and community outreach. She is the co-founder and past chairperson and current member of a collective or a collaborative of 5 libraries and other organizations that partner in a literacy initiative for educational and cultural programs known as the Springfield African American Read-In. Welcome, Dr. Jackson Brown. Next, we have Dr. Deborah Robinson, who holds a PhD and MBA and is also a research investigator at the Institute for Social Research at the University of Michigan. She has over 20 years of experience in survey research methodology, having worked on major national studies such as the National Survey of Black Americans and National Black Election Study. She was co-director of the BCALA IMLS Planning Grant and is principal investigator for the research grant. She holds a PhD from the University of Michigan, and I'd like to welcome her. Deborah has been a member of the ALA and BCALA for 6 years. It is a pleasure to have all you all here with us here at the Rural Summit, the Rural Library Network Conversations for Action. Welcome to our show, Drs. Grace, Deborah, and President Nichelle. Next slide, please. President
Next
Nichelle,
slide, please.
take it away. Yes.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Next slide. So here is our agenda for today, and I would like to thank all of you for taking time out of your schedule to listen to the exciting work that BCALA has occurring right now and the work that we've done in the past. So we're going to have an overview of Black History Month and the Black History Month project. We're going to talk about the Black History Month Toolkit and your first Black History Month program, and then next steps for the project and you. Next slide, please. So we're going to do a high-level background on Black History Month and an overview of the project. Next slide. If you could put in the chat whether you are familiar with the theme for this year's Black History Month. If you could just pop that in the chat so we can kind of see where people are and what their understanding is. And while you're doing that, we'll go over the origin of Black History Month. And so Carter G. Woodson is known as the founder of Black History Month, and he formed ASALH, the Association for Study of African American Life and History, which is what it's known as now. So it began as Black History Week and then was expanded to Black History Month. It came in February because we're honoring the birth date of Frederick Douglass as well as Abraham Lincoln. So it wasn't because it was the shortest month, it was to honor those birthdays. ASALH has a website, and there is a theme for every year. I see that several people have put that theme in there. Awesome. So it is African Americans and the arts. And I will put a link in a moment so you can go and look at some of the previous themes. And there are also tools on that website that can help you. In 1937, the Negro History Bulletin was co-founded with educator Mary McLeod Bethune, who of course was the founder of Bethune-Cookman College in Florida, which is still existing. Next slide, please. So this is the high level overview of the grant. So the planning grant went from 2020 to 2022. So we did a literature overview. There was a taxonomy of Black history. We did a sample, we had key findings, and then we did a draft of our national study. Right now, we're in the applied research grant portion of that. So we're utilizing the Public Library Survey from IMLS. We're creating a knowledge of the community scale, doing a national study with a representative sample, and we're going to be talking more about that. And so we're going to selectively be sending information out to libraries and asking them to answer that. So part of what we wanted to do today was to make you all aware of that, so that when it does come to your library, you'll know what we're talking about, how you can answer that, and we can get a good return on the sample. And then last but not least, we're going to have a digital Black History Month toolkit, which will be available on the website. And now I will turn it over to my colleagues. Next slide.
Oh, I forgot that this was automation. Why don't you hit next slide again? We asked during the planning grant with the convenience sample, does your library, and we also asked system level, do Black History Month programming? And we found that on the branch level, 22% did not, and on the system level, 13 did not do Black History Month programming. Next slide, please. So we also asked for those who did not do Black History Month programming, why? Why not? 22% said there was just a lack of interest in their library. 25% said they were not sure how to do it and they didn't want to get it wrong. 13% said the reason was due to a lack of African-American staff. 18% said lack of African-Americans in the community. And there was kind of a sizable percentage who checked other. And then we asked what were those other reasons. And one thing that came up again and again was small rural libraries where someone is just the only full-time person and just didn't have the time to create all these different celebrations. Another person said that the administration really wasn't supportive. And some said they did passive activities like book displays, but not programming. So I'm just going over this to give you a context of what we found, some key findings from the planning grant as we move forward. Next slide, please. So one purpose of the planning grant was also to develop a taxonomy of Black History Month programming. And a taxonomy is a type of a knowledge organization system, and it represents hierarchical relationships. So the items in red here are the higher level category, and the ones in the black are lower level. So let's say talks and discussions. You could have speaker panels, author panels, book clubs and groups, et cetera, with the other types of programming. So as you heard, I am not a librarian. So I was all excited about this, but then the librarian said, well, this is what we do. This is not different. And it's true. These kind of categories are really typical of some of the kinds of the programming that is typically done in libraries. What made it different, it was the content for Black History Month. So on the one hand, if you're developing your first Black History Month program, you don't have to think, ooh, it's something very different. It's something very similar to the kind of programming you do, but we'll talk about the content. And Dr. Grace Jackson Brown will be talking about how you could use this taxonomy as you develop your first Black History Month programming. Next slide, please. As we go to the next slide, we also asked about Black History Month programming focused on different periods. A lot of people felt the Black History Month programming was kind of on the civil rights, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, that era. So we asked, how often have you conducted Black History Month program focused on these various time periods? And aside from the ancient kind of African kingdoms, was focused on, well, we feel strongly the history of African Americans doesn't start when they landed here, right? So some people tie in that fuller history, looking at Africa, slave trade, etc., and the contributions Black people made in Africa as part of Black History Month. But a very high, over 70%, kind of never focus on that time period. But it was kind of spread out between slavery, Reconstruction, aftermath, civil rights, and even present in terms of the focus of Black History Month in the people who answered the survey. Next slide, please. So we asked, have you heard about the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, and their theme that they do a Black History Month theme every year. So when we usually present, we don't go to the results slide, but we see, what people say in the audience. So we were very surprised that 86% of the people had not heard of ASALH and that they do the History Month, and 76% of the people on the branch level had not heard. And as President Nichelle gave you this history, it's really important, very important, and Dr. Grace Jackson Brown will talk more about that, to tie the Black History Month programming to that theme and know that history. So that basically is just a quick overview of what we found in the planning grant. And we'll be talking later. We're doing a national survey, as President Nichelle mentioned, with a representative sample. So we'll ask some of these same questions again in the national survey, just so that we see maybe there's even a higher percentage, or maybe from 2 years ago, since we've been talking about this, more people are familiar with ASALH and the Black History Month theme. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Grace Jackson Brown.
All right. Next slide, please. So I will be talking about the Black History Month toolkit for public libraries, and particularly for beginners. And I want to just point out that I am a big collaborator. I love library programming that involves partnerships and collaborations. I've been working with the public libraries here in Springfield, Missouri for 15 years. I've been here for 15 years. Before that, I was in Indiana, but Springfield is not a very diverse community. It's in the Ozarks. It's much more diverse now, 15 years later from when I arrived. But in order to have successful Black History Month programming, you have to collaborate and have partnerships with the whole community. So when I'm discussing this and the development of the toolkit, that just gives you an idea of who I am as a professional and as a librarian. So next slide, please. So I am the head of a task force that has been charged to create a Black History Month library programming toolkit for beginners, or it's also been called BHM Toolkit 1.0. We are going to be targeting this first 1.0 toolkit for those who have never conducted Black History Month programming. So like the newcomers to this area of programming. And we are going to send out the toolkit to these beginners who we know will self-identify themselves through our pilot surveys, right? That's in progress right now, but through the pilot surveys, we'll know by the fall 2024 who has never done a program, and we will ask them to use the toolkit to develop a program in February 2025. And they will be very helpful to us because we will send them a follow-up questionnaire, and hopefully they'll complete the questionnaire, send it back to us, and we'll use that to develop the toolkit 2.0. We also will provide assistance to those new librarians doing Black History Month programming by perhaps a webinar, so that they can get further assistance in using the toolkit. So next slide, please. The toolkit is in progress right now, as I said, and I am the task force head of the toolkit. The task force is made up of public librarians because, as you heard in the introduction, I'm an academic librarian who collaborates with public libraries. But the task force is made up of actual public librarians. And we will get feedback in the development of the toolkit from librarians from the PLA, Public Library Association, as well as from our National Advisory Committee, which we also have. And there are many librarians who are public librarians on our advisory committee. So the toolkit is in progress now. It will be a digital resource. We are creating the toolkit, and it will be downloadable, a downloadable PDF that will be housed on the ALA Black Caucus website. And then persons can go in to that website, and anyone can download the toolkit once it's up. One of the resources on this toolkit will be the 6 steps for a successful Black History Month program. And you all are probably familiar with a lot of these steps for developing a program. So there's 6 steps. They're in this graphic, color-coded. The first is to consult the Black History Month theme, or basically determining a theme for a program, right? We mentioned that Black History Month was founded by a organization known as the National Association for the Study of African American Life and History. And every year they develop a theme, one that is going to be very current or something that people are interested in. And they develop this theme, and they have lots of resources for people who want to do programs. So we recommend that people use that theme, consult the theme. If they want to maybe take the local angle and do a local theme, that is fine also. The main thing is to, emphasize the celebration of African American achievements and contributions. So once that step is completed, and you might also have a committee. Often with programs, there are committees that you develop within your library, or that you draw in people from the community to work as developing the theme and to develop the program. Second step is to determine the audience for the program. That's important too. Do you want to have a program that's for the whole family? Do you want to target, maybe children, youth, even the tweens, teenagers? So that's important to decide early on as well. Decide on what's your goals and objectives of the program. Do you want to entertain? Do you want to inform? Do you want to educate? Perhaps you want to do a combination of those things, right? But definitely decide what is your goal for the program. Make it very uplifting and have a purpose in the program that everyone in your committee and that your community can rally around. Next step is decide what resources will you need for the program. All programming does take effort and it takes resources. So we'll talk more about what types of resources you might need, and partnerships that you might use to hold these Black History Month programs. Decide on what time you need to develop the program. And especially if you're getting an outside presenter, that might take some time to develop agreements to have that outside presenter. And always follow up your programs with feedback from the community. How did it go? You know, what things can you do better, improve upon? Even though it was a success, perhaps there are things that the audience can tell you. Next slide, please. As I said, the Black History Month theme is determined by this National Association for the Study of African American Life and History. That organization was also founded by Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who is the originator of the idea of Black History Month. At the time, it was called Negro History Week way back in 1926, but this celebration is almost 100 years old, and it has grown. It's now recognized nationally by our presidents every year, making a proclamation about, you know, schools and institutions celebrate African American achievement. So this year in 2024, the theme is actually African Americans and the arts, but this association decides on a theme like a year in advance. So in 2025, it'll be African Americans and labor, but everything that you will hear about as far as programming in 2024 is African Americans and the arts. You can actually go to the website. That website is very easy to remember, asalh.org. That's where the website is. And at the top of that website, there's a tab that says annual themes. And you can look there to see what the theme is for this year, 2024. They've already posted what's the theme for 2025. You can actually see what past themes they've had. And so it's kind of actually interesting to see over time what's been the Black History Month theme. So just go to the asalh.org and you'll find that out. Next slide, please. So determining the audience for your Black History Month program, that, as I said, that's very important. We want to have Black History Month programming be an outreach to our community. And there are lots of different segments of our community, right? Especially based on age groups, which you've shown here in this slide. We actually, the Black History Month grant, did a survey in 2020, the planning grant, and asked public librarians themselves, where is your focus on programming and, you know, Black History Month programming, if you do it? And as you see from the chart, programming, it kind of ties between, they have programming for children, 21%, programming for adults, 21%, and there was a choice in the survey that said all ages. We can assume, well, maybe that was the family programming, 15%. So those are the three age groups that were the focus for the audiences for the programming, according to the 2020 survey. Next slide, please. So as was pointed out earlier, a lot of the programming that we found is done by the public librarians is very kind of universal, which is not surprising in the library profession. We do lots of programs. So we did in the 2020 grant, a survey to ask the librarians, well, what kind of Black History Month programming do you do, if you do programming? And this is the taxonomy of Black History Month programming, according to that survey and our research. And as Dr. Robinson was pointing out, the red categories are the large categories, and underneath those are the subcategories of the type of programming that's offered. For example, for talks and discussions, you might have a speaker panel. Lots of public libraries have speaker panels. Performances, you might have a poetry reading, and that's another frequent type of program. So if you just glean through this list, you're probably familiar with the programming. And we want you to, especially if you're going to do the first Black History Month programming, pick something that you're familiar with, that you feel comfortable with. And you just have to then look at the content, because that's what's going to make Black History Month programming special, because it'll be culturally specific, right? And your community will learn more about another culture and the exciting contributions of that of African Americans. Or you might have a speaker that's educational or informational. Again, the whole community is learning about these contributions. And so pick something that you're comfortable with, a program area that you really get excited about, and that you have resources for. So next slide, please. So resources, what are resources that are needed? Well, as librarians know, we often have very tight budgets, and you're going to have to look at the resources. Well, what money is needed, what staffing is needed, especially for a small library. You're might only be one person or a staff of two. So that's very important. What money, staffing, time are you going to need? And as this chart shows, like the resources we all know about, buy-in from your leadership, that's very important. We want to get, like for Black History Month programming, we want buy-in not only from our leadership, but from the whole library, your whole library. If you have multiple staff, or buy-in from your whole community, set up a committee to do this programming, and let everyone feel that they have ownership of the theme and of the program. If you have an African American librarian on staff, that's wonderful, because they might have insider knowledge about that type of program. Or sometimes it might be a person who's white, or a person who's Asian, or a person who's Latino, that actually knows something about African American culture, and you want to like learn about those people who have a knowledge. When we were doing our focus groups, there was like a white librarian or staff person who said, hey, well, I worked for an African American museum. I'm not African American, but I know a lot about the types of culture that is there, that just for the celebration. So just make use of your staff, make use of your community wide. Make sure this is an outreach type of program, Black History Month programming, where there's outreach. Look at what local themes can you tie in, or local angles you can tie in from the national theme. What other libraries nearby might be planning a program? And so on the one side of the chart here on the graph, it talks about there may be resources that you haven't explored that you might utilize, who want to be collaborators if they were asked. So, for example, organizations in your community, in AACP, maybe Black churches, maybe they were never asked by the library, hey, what history do you have that you could share with us? So there are lots of people within the community, organizations or individuals. There might be a historically Black college in your community. If not right in your town, maybe close by within the region, the state that you're here located in. Tap in on all of those resources. And there's many others listed there. Next slide, please. So next steps for your project. I'll turn it back over to our president of the BCLA, Nichelle Hayes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Grace. We really appreciate that overview. That was really powerful. I would encourage all of you to save the links that we put in the chat. So we put quite a few links in there as resources. So I don't want anyone to feel like they have to go at this alone. And so Dr. Grace mentioned a lot of different resources. And I would say go for the low-hanging fruit. Maybe it's that you share a program that's being put on by someone else. And so ASALH as an organization does virtual programs. And so they have things that go out on YouTube, on their Facebook page. So maybe you can, as you start out, promote those and then build yourself up from there. I also put in the chat links to award-winning books by Black authors and about Black themes. If you don't have anyone on your staff who's familiar with that kind of work, you can definitely tap into that. I also put in the link to BCALA, which was formed in 1970, and we advocate for Black patrons and we support Black library staff. Support staff as well as library professionals with MLSs and MLISs. So if you're trying to tap into that segment, we would be an amazing group to tap into. And what I'd like to do right now, if you can type one thing into the chat that you learned today that you didn't know before you came to our webinar, just one thing. We're just trying to get an understanding of, what we hit and maybe what we could have hit a little bit better. And as you're doing that, next slide, please. So here are, and I see we've got that several people weren't aware that there was a Black History Month theme. And as Dr. Grace said, this year is the arts. And I did put in the chat the poster, and you can also purchase those posters from ASALH. So that's another thing that you can do. So someone did not even know that ASALH existed. And so what I would encourage you to do is to share this knowledge, because if you're not aware, I'm sure there's some other people that are not aware also. So our next steps is we're going to outreach to libraries selected for pilot number 1. And again, that's a targeted outreach. And so you'll be getting those via email, analysis of pilot number 1 for development of the knowledge of the community scale. And then pilot number 2 is finalizing and getting a 10-item knowledge of the community scale. Then we're going to be launching the National Black History Month Survey. And after that, a dissemination of the Black History Month Toolkit. And as we said before, that toolkit will be digital, and that will be a living document that we hope will continue to grow and become more dynamic, that people can tap into, and that will not be beyond or behind a paywall. That will be open and accessible to everyone. We want everyone to be able to do this kind of work. And the reason why this is important is because we know that what we're going through right now in our country is that some people want to control what other people are reading and what other people are understanding and learning. And we want to kind of broaden that. We want people to understand that a lot of people have come to this country and made amazing contributions. And if we don't talk about that, that's hard for people to really understand how our country was formed. So you said you hope that the toolkit would be available sooner. We appreciate that. Right now, what we do have online is a timeline of Black history within America, and that might be quite helpful for you. And so if you tap into those links that we offered, that might help you to move forward in the way that you're looking to do that. I also mentioned in the chat that there are branches of ASALH. So I happen to live in Indianapolis, and we have a local branch here of which I'm a member. We put on a program last night, which was well received, and it was talking about the power of the Black press. And so you might want to go to the National ASALH website to see if there's a local branch in your area or close to you, and you might be able to partner with them and tap into work that they're doing. Yes, and so we're asking that you put your email address in the chat if you're interested in receiving the link for the toolkit when it's completed. So next slide, please. So these are the next steps. I would encourage you to take a screenshot of this or get your camera out, which one that you feel is most comfortable. If your library is selected for the Black History Month programming, please respond and complete the survey. And what I would say, depending on how large your system is, if you're one branch, it's a lot easier to communicate than if you have 20, 30, or 40 branches. Spread this information out to your director, to the director of public services, to other librarians. So if someone gets that information, they will know what's going on and how to respond to that. And also share with them the Black History Month URL. So sign up to receive the Black History Month Toolkit 1.0. Will the slides be available after this over? I will defer to Dr. Grace and Dr. Deborah on that. I'm not sure. I'll let them. Okay, they're saying yes. So yes, we will let you access that afterwards. Also, reach out to African Americans in your community and nearby. So there are a lot of organizations, and maybe even if they aren't in your area, they're at least in your state. So we have the NAACP, we have the Urban League, we also have fraternities and sororities that can help you to be able to tap in to African American culture and history. I also put in a link for information about African kingdoms. And as we saw from the data, not very many people were tapping into that. And so maybe that is a way to share information. You can also share information on social media. It can be very simple. You can send a link, you can do some bites, you can maybe even do a TikTok. So there are a lot of ways to engage your population. So think about your finances, think about your staff and collection resources. And honestly, this is something that you should be working on a year in advance to determine if you have money for honorariums, to start making these connections so that you're not waiting until January to try to pull something together. And as Dr. Grace mentioned, they already have the theme available for next year, for 2025, which is labor. And so that's a great way to get ahead of what you're doing there. Next slide, please. Okay. So this is our planning project website, of which I did put the link in the chat. And so we talk about Black History Month. We've got a QR code there. You can click on resources. You can look at a timeline. And we also have our taxonomy. So I would encourage all of you to go there to really to do a deeper dive on this Black History Month project that we've been doing. And so this is based on an IMLS grant, and it's going to ultimately be 3 different grants. And I just want to publicly applaud Dr. Grace and Dr. Deborah for the work that they have done. They have worked tirelessly, long days, long nights, weekends, and we couldn't have done any of this without their expertise. So I just want to thank them for that. Next slide, please. Okay. So now we are available for questions. We asked you to put them in the Q&A box, so it will be easier for us to answer. And so myself, Dr. Grace, and Dr. Deborah will answer them, and we're ready for your questions.
President
someone
Michelle,
mentioned,
could they also come off mute if they needed to ask the question, if they like to do that?
if they can,
Mhm.
I know, yeah, I noticed a lot of people are off camera and muted, so I'm not sure how many people are on the desk trying to multitask. But
Oh,
yeah, if
that's
you
fine.
can come off mute, feel free to do that. I did want to mention that we will be having the National Conference for African American Librarians, and that will be July 24th through the 27th, and that is going to be in New Orleans, Louisiana. Everyone is welcome. We are very excited about our conference for this year. Nikole Hannah-Jones will be one of our featured speakers, so we're very excited. We're also going to have Matthew Broadus. We're going to have the Louisiana State Poet Laureate, and so we're just really excited about bringing people together to learn about what we do and how to propel the profession. So we're still waiting for a few questions.
While we
while,
wait,
yeah, go ahead.
there's quite a few network members in the rural area that have not customarily um, actually lifted up the opportunity to program during this month, and some challenges. Um, what would you say that, those that are in, let's say, predominantly white environments, what they could actually, what would be their approach to encouraging folks to participate in that particular Black History Month programming?
Well, first, I would like to say that Black History Month is kind of the appetizer for learning more about Black history. It's kind of your starting off point, but we're actually Black 365. And so don't feel like you have to be regulated even to February to do this programming. You can do this programming anytime. You can do things for Juneteenth. Also in June is Black Music Month. So there's lots of things for you to do. But what I would say as far as starting out is to go to ASALH, go to that website, kind of do a deep dive. I'm sure there are a lot of people that don't know when it started, how it started, or the history of it and its transformation. I think starting there, perhaps at a professional development that you might have at your system and sharing that with your colleagues might be a good jumping off point. And then perhaps trying to invite some people to come in to talk about that. And so kind of each one reach one, I think is a great way to start off. And then also tapping into other people to see what kind of programs that they're doing. I think we're living in an age where we can access things 24/7 online, on social media. So you don't feel like you have to create everything. It might be sharing something. It might be reaching out to someone who's already done a program, seeing if they could come to your particular library or library system and see if you can work together. So we don't have to do this alone. So there's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And so that's what we would like to do.
Right. And I would just encourage people to um, seek out partnerships, collaborators in your community. We partnered with here in Springfield, the park system, Parks and Recreation System, for example, the Boys and Girls Club, because you'd be surprised with those other organizations, particularly if they have youth involvement. The youth are often very tuned in to what's happening, maybe nationwide because they're on social media. So they know, for example, about the music or the fashions, they've seen on TikTok or something, other announcements about Black History Month and the theme of that year. May not have it locally, but it's a national theme. So they've seen, television or social media where the theme is presented, and that's perked their curiosity. But within your library, you um, haven't picked up on that spark and built upon, that seed. And so I would say, look at your partnerships, put your youth on the committees. This is like the 50th anniversary of hip hop, for example. Most people after 50 years have heard some of those artists, for example, because those artists are now on national commercials. They're now part of, social media. There've been special programs on television. So again, just like get the pulse of your community, all of the different generations, all of the different organizations. They're probably Black churches. They probably have they often Black churches have a history of their development, even like the local churches, but they've never been asked by the library, hey, what what is the history that you can share with us on this particular day, or month during Black History Month, or year round, as President Hayes was saying. there's so many holidays that you can celebrate Black history or Black achievements. There's Poetry Month, for example, that you can just, oh, in April, we're going to celebrate Langston Hughes that month and find out what kind of poetry he had and, you know, do a reading at your library. So reach out to your
You can
community,
go back, Holly.
use the state library. Your state libraries might have history as well.
And I would just add, I think we had this on the slide, you know, there may not be a large African American community in your town or area, but there may be close by. So making those links as have been said, and the links to the HBCUs nearby, or even the link to, you know, just direct whatever college university nearby may have a Black Studies department. Those that could be helpful as well. I put in the chat because somebody asked about creating an ASALH chapter. Obviously, we're not a part of that. You need to contact ASALH, the membership, because they have their process of what it takes to establish a chapter. And someone asked about the slides. Again, I think the Rural Library Network, you guys will be getting out these slides to folks as PDF maybe. And this is our contact information.
Well, we are so delighted to have you with us on our show today. Again, to recap, the Black Caucus of the American Library Association has been working with the Public Library Association and University of Michigan on this groundbreaking IMLS-funded project, Black History Month programming in public libraries. Doctors Grace and Deborah and President Nichelle, thank you for sharing this information about the study and some of the key findings from the planning phase. As you could probably see in the chat, people are excited about this and even want it like yesterday, right? So definitely you're on the right track. This is definitely something that people would definitely have practical use. And again, you know, as you're creating a toolkit with foundational knowledge, you know, the information that you've collected over time and research, and you're also today providing an increased awareness about Black History Month. I encourage those who are on today, continue to educate yourself, and the finger comes back to me as well, and continue to you know, be on the lookout for steps for successful planning of your programs, and you know, and it's not just for one particular type of individual, it's for your whole community. Right. And I really do appreciate the suggestion of look for partners, strategic partners throughout your community, your universities, your colleges, United Way, in addition to some of the other Boys and Girls Club types of organization. By attending this webinar, again, if you haven't already dropped your email in the chat, we will plan to send out the toolkit to those who dropped their emails in the chat, and then also those who have registered as well. And we'll make available the actual slides. Now, without further ado, I have some announcements as we're closing out today. And Holly, if you could go to the next slide for me, please. So as she puts up the slides, want to make an announcement that as I started at the very beginning, there will be two types of conversations that you can definitely take advantage of and learn from. And here's an example that's coming up next week, February the 13th. It's Conversations for Impact. And this will actually be a series that's hosted by Dr. Chanel Barber, Partners for Rural Impact's Chief of Staff and Vice President for Strategic Partnerships. These webinars will take place on every second, or actually on second Tuesdays of each month. And February's conversation will feature Maura Lee Keller with NCAN, working with colleges on everything you need to know about the new FAFSA updates for 2024 through 2025. We want you to stay informed so that you can be a strong resource for your students and families and help them navigate through the FAFSA world. As you can probably imagine, it can be a little challenging. If you are actually wanting to sign up for that particular conversation for Impact webinar, let me drop the website in the chat. And I'll do that now. Hopefully it comes through for you. Let me see. There you go. Hopefully it comes through. If not, let me see. I think Holly can actually maybe also drop a link as well. So definitely register for that. Next slide. So what's next for Rural Library Network? We will have another Conversations for Action, and actually that's actually for action, and it can be in action too. And that's Wednesday, March the 6th. Really excited about this guest coming to speak to our network members on summer learning. And our guest will be Liz McChesney, and she will actually be working, she works with the National Summer Learning Association. You'll learn quick and easy STEAM program ideas for deepening learning outcomes and gain more awareness and access to free resources to help deepening and align your programming with not only some of the school types of results, intended results, but also the goals to move academic outcomes for your youth. The topic is Summer Matters, Libraries and Learning in the Summertime. And again, it will be an interactive webinar. Please bring the following items: 2 paper clips, 1 binder clip, 2 rubber bands, and a small paper drinking cup and a pencil. So it's going to be kind of interactive and fun. And we're going to actually have a random drawing for a STEM kit. So please chime in for those who are in attendance to that particular webinar. So are there any further questions or any other announcements that from the attendee, anything that's happening there in your communities? You can come off the chat and share. And then also the speakers, any final word that maybe you've thought about before we close? We have a few minutes.
Just thank you for this opportunity, because we know the vast majority of public libraries are in small towns and rural areas. So we really want to get word of what we're doing and to kind of underscore that their voice, especially for this survey, is so important, whether they're doing Black History Month programming currently or not. So we really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Excellent. Anybody else? Hand raised?
Yes, we did have a question in the chat about who across the country is doing Black history throughout the year and who's a shining example. So I did put a link in for the Center for Black Literature and Culture, which is in Indianapolis, and I was founding director of that. And so we definitely emulated Black 365. I also put in a link from our Black History Month website about resources. So there are resources about books and about other libraries across the country that are doing this work. So feel free to click on that link, Black History Month resources, and that will help you to kind of see what other people are doing. But that's a fantastic question, and I really had a great time today. Thank you.
Excellent, wonderful. Thank you again. Excellent resources. Thank you all. And again, this is being recorded. We will have it up in YouTube once it uploads. Thank you for joining today's webinar. You take care, and thank you for all you do
Thank
in the
you.
front lines. Take care.